Welcome to the Most Dangerous Device radio show, where we discuss free energy and over-unity devices and their impact on society. Our guest is Daniel Nunez. Daniel runs 1StopEnergies based out of the Bronx, New York. And he has been experimenting with the Unification Coil, a combination of Rodin and Abha windings. Please welcome Daniel to the Most Dangerous Device radio show. Daniel, the reason I contacted you about an interview was because I saw a video on YouTube where you were demonstrating an amount of power input into a Rodin-type coil, but you were getting more power out of the coil than you were putting in, and you were measuring it using a couple different meters. And so that perked my interest, and I wanted to talk to you about that today and see if maybe you could explain a little bit about what you're doing, how did you make that happen, those sort of things.
For sure. Basically what we're doing is we have this hybrid, we call it the Unification Coil. It's a mix between the Abha coil that Randy Powell developed the mathematics for and the Rodin coil that Marco Rodin developed the mathematics for. And we married the two of them together to create the Unification Coil. So basically what's happening is we input a sound frequency, and that sound frequency can be somewhere around 30 volts. And we input this specific sound frequency, and by the time it comes out of the other end of the coil, it has increased in voltage and amperage.
Now, you're saying sound frequency, but obviously you mean electrical vibrations, right? It would not be sound since it's an electrical input, right?
Sure, it's sound and electricity are both one and the same. Our electricity that we use right now is 60 hertz.
Right.
So that's a sound frequency.
Okay.
So it comes at a specific frequency and it travels. So what we're using is frequency much, much higher. What we use now is 60 hertz through the wall. We're operating in the kilohertz range, above 20 kilohertz.
Okay, so above 20 kilohertz, that's above human hearing then.
For sure.
If you don't mind me asking, I do a little bit of research on the Rodin coil, and it's very interesting. Did you find a resonant frequency for the coil? Is that one of the keys to making this output more energy than you're putting in?
That's right. So we figured out that there has to be a certain proximity between wire bundles. So if you tighten up the coil design and you basically work off of certain baselines that we developed, you can actually scale up these designs into much more powerful units. So this is actually our fourth coil. The first one was the same amount of wire on a larger diameter. Then we tried half the amount of wire on the same size diameter. And we basically developed the understanding that with a given amount of wire, there needs to be a corresponding amount of space between each bundle.
Okay.
And that develops a resonant spike, if you will.
Right.
So depending on how many wires you have in the bundle, how close they are together, you'll be basically fishing for a different resonant frequency. And when you hit that frequency, it's very pronounced because you have... sometimes you get ozone that comes out of the center of the coil. So low voltage ozone, that's something that never happens. You basically, there's two ways to create ozone. It can be a high voltage corona discharge or ultraviolet light. So at a 30 volt input, we shouldn't be getting that either way, but we are.
Wow.
It's also generating a magnetic monopole, so that's another way that you can test it to see if your coil is working properly. It should be either north or either south in the center. It's never both.
Right. I've seen some videos where Marco Rodin was showing that the center of a Rodin coil is simply a monopole, which is not supposed to exist, as I understand it. It's supposed to have north and south,
that's
and not
right.
just one or the other. So truly, this is a unique type of coil design. Can you explain a little bit about how these coils are made? What's so special about these coils?
Well, the Unification Coil was created through our own creativity. We basically figured out that we can create these frameworks to uphold the integrity of the torus and piece them together in a type of Lego fashion where you can just have these discs and you're piecing together this torus and hand feeding the wires through. so that you get the same coil every single time. What they were using in the past was kids' toys, so they had rocker rack toys, and they were creating rodent coils that way. But then when they discovered this Randy Powell mathematics, it became very difficult to uphold that integrity of the torus, because it's more like a yin-yang, where one side is on and the other side is off. So it's a certain symmetry that has to go through this donut shape. So basically what we've done here effectively is the underlay has 576 wires all connected in a series fashion where you have half and half. So channel A and channel B, you have basically two wires throughout the whole torus running in parallel next to each other. So what ends up happening is you're passing energy through both of them simultaneously in opposite directions.
Okay.
So you're creating a 180-degree phasing.
Okay.
And what that does is it basically creates a directional twist almost. So you can envision you have the clockwise. So if we're on the northern hemisphere of the planet and you flush the toilet, it goes down clockwise. And the opposite is true if we go to the southern hemisphere and flush the toilet, it's counterclockwise. That's because we have these literal fields that are spinning around us at all times, and it governs the flow of energy. So basically what we're doing is we're accessing both of those energy flows by allowing energy to spin in both directions through this coil. It's almost like an electron accelerator at this point. That's pretty much what we're seeing. And not only that, we also are getting an infusing or an encrypting almost of a sound frequency. So if you put 5 kilohertz in, you actually yield 15 kilohertz out.
So it's acting like a tripler.
Yeah, and then the same thing is true for if you input 9 kilohertz, you get 27 kilohertz out.
Isn't that interesting? Is that only with the unification coil, or is that with the rodent coil in general?
That's only the things that we found with the unification coil, is that we can get that tripling effect at certain frequencies. We discovered that because no meters are capable of reading the voltage output in its entirety. So we had to figure out a way to kind of create some kind of measurement for what it was that we were seeing.
What do you mean no meters can measure it? I mean, can't we measure into the gigahertz now?
Well, for instance, if you plug in a voltmeter, and what we did was we went out and got one of the more expensive models of true RMS readers, and we applied it to the coil, and at a certain frequency, basically we get into that resonance spike range, and the meter peaks out.
Oh, I see.
So it'll battery failure, it'll turn off, the screen will turn white.
I see.
And it's incapable of handling that type of voltage. So what we do is we measure in performance, where we line up all of these neon bulbs in series, and we can go up to 10 of them.
Okay.
And this is an indicator of 60 volts apiece. So if you can light 10 neon bulbs in series, you're showing a 600 volt output.
Wow. Okay.
So what we've discovered is that you can plug in one, and it'll light that one neon bulb to a comfortable orange. And that's the right color. And then you can go all the way over to the 10th one, and they're all that same self-regulating orange color. Whereas you would think that if you're overloading one of them, it would start turning maybe like a bright red or purple.
Right.
Because you're actually transmuting the gas inside of the bulb by increasing the voltage or overloading it. But instead, we have this self-regulation of energy that never existed up until this day. It was just, you have a set transformer that's throwing out a set frequency of voltage that's given, either 120 or 240.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we have to create all of our technology around. Instead, we're basically creating a large voltage access point where you can plug in things and it self-regulates to that load.
So are you telling me that you now have a coil that is self-sustaining, that does not require batteries?
Up until this point, we have discovered that we can create some kind of setup where you use one battery to create a sound frequency, and it'll basically use 100 milliamps or so of energy, and that can provide lighting for a whole village. and you could basically top that off with a solar panel. At this point, we still haven't figured out how to loop the energy back in around on itself. But I think that's going to be some work that we're going to need to do with some seasoned electrical engineers. This is actually all knowledge that we have been researching for ourselves over the course of the past 4 years.
Well, that's awesome.
And thank you. It's never conventional schooling.
Well, right.
Getting more experts in their fields to unite on it and figure out how to loop energy around or how to create that perpetual motion system. That's really what's exciting us, just to be able to have that ability to share the knowledge.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons I'm really excited to be in this field. And as you may or may not know, this show is about finding technologies and people who are working on devices that produce over unity or free energy or devices that produce energy at such an incredibly inexpensive point that it becomes virtually free. So it's exciting to talk to you. When I saw this video of you showing this, it's the first time I saw a rodent coil actually produce more power out. Now, I have seen some other coils where they have a magnet that turns around and it seems to be generating power. However, your circuit appeared to show X amount of milliamps in and up to 2 or 3 times greater milliamps out, or power, which is unusual. Conventional science tells us today that should not be possible. So which leads me to my next question. Have your discoveries been independently verified?
Well, we haven't achieved peer review yet. All we've been able to do up until this point is basically post our findings online and share it with people. We've been able to do some footwork with the coil, take it around to different locations, show different people, engineers, and really what we've been doing is just raising a lot of eyebrows, never getting a peer review yet up until this point. I believe that's going to come when we have a few more coils constructed. We're actually working on a showcase right now where we could create somewhere around 12 coils, distribute 6 of them, and then create a showcase with another 6 so that we can show the functionality of the motor application, the lighting applications, and different things like that. So
this is absolutely wonderful news, and I'm so glad to get to talk to you.
Likewise.
About this. So you say you put 20 kilohertz in. Do you also get 60 kilohertz out through this tripling effect?
No, that effect only happens at certain frequencies, ironically enough. And I'm kind of attributing that, I'm not an expert, so I'm not too sure, but I'm attributing that to the fact that the resonance spike actually travels in a wave. So if you catch the spike a bit early in the frequency band, you won't yield as much voltage. And then you basically search a bit more and you get to the real spike. So it's almost like you can envision a wave that starts out narrow and then it expands longer and you have a lot more potential. So there's something with that you can get that resonance effect at 5 and also at 9.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't hold true throughout the whole spectrum, ironically enough.
It makes me wonder, you say you've got a gap between the coils. The spacing between the coils is going to influence the frequency. So if your frequency goes up, I wonder if it's just the frequency. I'm just thinking out loud here. That's
completely correct. If the spacing is further apart, then the resonant frequency is much higher.
Right, that makes sense.
Because the individual bundle has to do a lot more work, or it has to have a much higher frequency to contact the other one next to it.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like if I'm resonating with you from where I'm at in New York, I'm going to have to resonate pretty hard to get to where you're at.
Right. But let's look at what we know about resonance and frequency right now. Isn't it true that the higher frequency you go, the shorter the wavelength? So it seems like the higher in frequency you go, the gap between the coils should be less.
For sure. So what we're seeing here is actually counterintuitive to the way that modern electronics is taught. you really shouldn't be getting much functionality out of high frequencies in that range. But then they also found that the Bosnian pyramid has an energy beam that shoots out of the top of it through the point that measures at 28 kilohertz or so.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's basically utilizing the same kind of fundamentals where you have the pyramid creating a resonance with itself. Mm-hmm. And then they also find that negatively charged ions are double in quantity below the surface of the pyramid, so you can actually go down there and heal yourself.
Yeah, pyramids are fascinating devices.
For sure. It's a rediscovered ancient technology, I'm assuming.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's just utilizing the platonic solids to harness energy. And the torus just happens to be the all-encompassing platonic solid.
Mm-hmm. I'm convinced that we are not the first intelligent society that lived on this planet.
Oh, likewise. Yeah. We couldn't be if we're getting the downloads now.
Well, you were describing that you're having one coil wrapped around another coil, and either 2 or 3 times doing this. I forgot what number you said. But then it reminded me of Stephen Mark's TPU units, toroidal power units. Are you familiar with those?
No, I'm not.
Oh, well, I may have showed you some stuff. There has been debate whether or not his technology was real or if it was faked, and nobody really knows for sure. But there's been several people trying to recreate what he showed on some videos on YouTube, where he had some coils wrapped around in a certain way, and he would send a very high frequency around it in one direction, and then in an opposite direction, another high frequency, and it produced a spike. And he was able to use those spikes to output power from a device that was about 12 inches by 12 inches. There are several videos of him showing these devices working. Whether or not they are real or not, up for debate. But I found it interesting that you're describing a device now, and you've never even heard of this person, that appears to exhibit similar characteristics using 2 coils with a resonant power spike.
It's like the yin-yang. It's fundamental, I guess. All the technologies are really the same. If you think about it, you have John Bedini, who's working on recapturing back EMF and radiant spikes. So the whole reason why we began building these coils is we started out building Bedini coils, and we successfully made a whole bunch of different designs. And we wanted to elaborate on a little bit more of a detailed coil. Mm-hmm. So we weren't just going to use a regular solenoid. We wanted to use a Rodin coil or Starship or something that created a much more powerful magnetic field. And that brought us to Marco Rodin's work and Randy Powell. Then we found that these coils could actually produce those radiant spikes without spinning a magnet. And all you really have to do is put a sound frequency in. It's just that the sound frequency has to be correct.
Mm-hmm. Has to resonate with the size of the coil.
For sure.
And you use an oscilloscope to find that resonant frequency?
Actually, we didn't have an oscilloscope when we first found it. I had a neon bulb in my hand, and I basically was, for some reason, I just got the idea to take the neon bulb and try to ground it to one of the output leads, and found that I was able to turn on the neon bulb directly through my body. Mm-hmm. And, use my body as a ground. And then that's how we actually found the high voltage, because the meters that we had at the time were telling us that it was only 1 volt, but I knew that couldn't be true.
Right. So
I decided to just try to ground through my body, and it worked. And that's how we were able to see that. And then later on, of course, we got the oscilloscope, and the spike is too large for the screen. So when you hit this spike, it extends far beyond the reading capability of the actual device.
So you're estimating thousands of volts then?
For sure. And that's the only reason why you would get coronal discharge anyway for ozone production, is if there's high voltage.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, the coronal discharge only happens from somewhere around 7,000 to 30,000 volts. So on a 1-to-1 ratio, where you have wire A and wire B proportional to each other, there should not be a stepping up or stepping down of voltage. It should be, if you input 30 volts, you get out 30 volts.
Mm-hmm.
But on a 1-to-1 ratio, and that's another thing that's taught in school, is that a 1-to-1 transformer is never going to step up voltage at all, especially not the way that the coil is doing.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Randy Powell and his math, and I'm familiar with Marco Rodin and the coil and the math behind how to wind the coil. How does Randy Powell's math differ from Marco Rodin's?
So basically, if you envision a torus, so you have this donut shape, and the donut shape is covered with numbers.
Yes.
And there are repeating patterns throughout this donut shape. You have 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, and 3, 6, 9. So 3, 6, 9 are gap spaces. 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5 are positive and negative. The numbers can be interpreted in two different ways, where you have the points actually mapping out spires, or the points are mapping out natural progressions of number patterns. So Randy Powell basically said what the Rodin coil is mapping is the spires. It's like the points of the star. And his number sequencing maps out more like a yin-yang, where if you look at it from above, half of the wire is on and half of it is off. So you have one on the positive realm and one in the negative realm. And that's the difference between the two, is that you have, in a Rodin coil, one complete turn is 12 progressions throughout the torus all the way around. Randy Powell's work is half and half. So it's just two different ways of interpreting the same exact torus of numbers.
Okay. What got you interested in this, Daniel?
I guess we became interested when we started going to school. My wife and I was going for green and sustainable resources, and she was going for psychology, and we basically were interested in somehow getting off of the grid and reevaluating sustainability, if you will. And it came to me one day, it was just, solar panels are based on finite resources, so are all the other options that are out there. And not to mention, if you want a solar panel to get off grid, you're more than likely going to have to pay somewhere around $20,000 and accrue some kind of debt.
True.
So that was already X'd out. So we began the search for perpetual motion, and we were trying to create somehow an energy-efficient nightlight that can run all night long, because my wife is not too fond of sleeping in the dark. So we started trying to do that, and we came across John Searle's work with the SEGs, and we were looking into these Perendev motors, basically all magnet motors that were based on the principles of magnetic shielding and being able to direct momentum in one way. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden we just came across Marco Rodin's work. So the real confirmation for us was we built our first coil. We had it in the middle of the floor. This was in our basement apartment at the time. And it was just the coil sitting on the tile, and it was plugged into an outlet. And we turned it on. The coil completely fried, and we had these scissors in the inside of them. Mm-hmm. And to this day, those scissors are magnetized with the south polarity only. So the scissors flew out of the coil as it went up in smoke, and it was just quite the confirmation that those scissors could now still pick up nails and things like that. So it was just like, okay, we have to figure out what's going on with this. So then all of a sudden we started getting into this UFO research and looking into spinning ferrofluid and rotating plasma and all these different things that we never even concerned ourselves with. And it was just like so many confirmations that how could you quit at that point?
Right.
So yeah, the math just got deeper, and then we got into the ABHA coils. From there we started developing our frames, and decided that we were going to end the separation between the Rodin math and ABHA math and just combine the two, because they clearly both do beautiful different things. You have this rodent coil that compresses the field into the very center to a degree that you can levitate ball magnets. And then you have the ABHA coil that creates a field that's large enough to consume a room. You can pick up this field with a magnetic detector, a magnetic field detector. It's 20 feet away from the coil.
Now, excuse me, but what's the difference between an ABHA coil and a rodent coil?
They're constructed in two different fashions, and that's what I was getting at before, is that the rodent coil progresses 12 times for one turn.
Okay.
It basically goes over and under throughout this spire, a star-shaped fashion, and one complete revolution throughout the whole coil, it's 12 revolutions over and under to the center of the hole.
Right, okay.
So the ABHA coil is basically individual bundles of wire that are all connected to each other in series that go basically just one revolution around through the center of the coil. So that's something that we have to make some videos, and we would like to create some kind of instructional videos for the construction of these coils and allow people to replicate them.
I think that would be a fantastic thing. That would be something that I would be interested in. It'd be fun.
For sure. And I was also saying it looks a lot more difficult than what it really is.
Mm-hmm.
When we get some kids doing it and we can show that it's simple enough for children to manufacture them if they wanted to, that's going to be even better, because I've seen a lot of over unity devices, and I've looked into this practical guide to free energy devices, and I see that a lot of stuff has multiple moving parts, and you have all these different complexities between systems, and you have to position things properly or else they don't work, and all of those things are taken out with the coil. It's very basic.
Right.
I think it's going to be pretty easy for everyone to understand and then build technologies around it. So really, it's just a coil. There's a coil in your cell phone. There's a coil in everything, in your computers. If an expert computer processor comes along and sees this coil and decides that he wants to plug in an Ethernet jack and figure out that you can increase computer processing capability just by plugging into this coil, that would be pretty groundbreaking as well. So it's just, there are many fields that they'll be adaptable to.
Now, what is the purpose of your company? Are you trying to go public? Are you trying to gain funding? Are you trying to patent something? What is your end goal, Daniel?
Well, we're not so much concerned with patenting. At this point, what we would really like to do is start teaching these fundamentals to as many people as possible. We would like to create some kind of a teaching model, platform, and create some kits. So really what we're working on now is getting the price down for parts as much as possible. We're looking at somewhere around $400 per coil at the current moment. And the more we can get that down, we can construct these coils and also teach people how to construct them themselves. Just create some new fundamental knowledge and share that with the world. I think that's important right now, more so than attaining any kind of a patent on technologies that are just rediscovered ancient wonderfulness.
I think that is absolutely wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that.
Thank you.
One of the things that I believe that has to change on this planet for us all to awaken and for us all to enter this next step is that we have to get to the point where money is not the driving factor for what we do.
That's right.
And that leads me to tell you why I am into this. I believe that energy is tied to the financial system. Our financial system and the energy system are interlinked. And once we get free energy, over unity, or energy that is so cheap that anybody can afford it, then we will see a level of financial security on this planet like we've never seen before.
For sure, which leads to happy people.
Well, at least necessary ingredient for the physical part to exist.
That's right. That's health. That's real health when people are able to grow their own food and have their lighting so that they can learn at night. For instance, we have this water machine that could create water out of the humidity in the air.
You do personally?
We do, yes. the beautiful thing is to think about, just being able to plug in a coil into that machine and give that to someone in a third world country that never had their own electricity or water, and they can actually cultivate their own crops.
I think that's fantastic. It is a fact that if we have unlimited amounts of energy, we have unlimited amounts of water, because 2/3 of the planet is water, and we can use energy to distill the water, take the salt out, and the whole dry land could be fertile. We could have enough food to feed every person on this planet many times over.
That's right.
So energy is the key. So I'm very happy to hear that you are taking the education route. And so I can assume then that you're freely willing to share the knowledge that you have found with other people who contact you. I notice on your website you have a donation page.
Yes, we do.
Okay. I'll definitely post that again on my website also.
Thank you very much, Larry.
Because I fully support people that are adopting the attitude that you have right now in educating the people about the existence of this technology, of these kinds of technologies.
We're all connected.
Absolutely.
That's right.
I teach spiritual teachings every week, and one of the things I teach is there's only one of us here.
That's right. That's right. And the beautiful thing is that we're actually coming to a point where technology is bringing us back to that understanding, where we've had this barrier between a scientific point of view and a spiritual point of view all this time. And now we're coming to a point where we can bring the science and marry it together.
Yes.
With the spirituality and create this perfect torus of a balanced system. And the beauty is we haven't even pushed it to the breaking point yet to find out what is the maximum amount of energy we can draw from it or input into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot more discoveries to come.
How are you financing your research, Daniel?
Everything up until this point has been self-financed. That's pretty much how we've gotten to where we are today, and I'm hoping that changes in the near future and we're able to really launch this off the way that it deserves to be launched and share it with the world in a more speedy way. All the work that you see on our YouTube channel has all been self-constructed materials just by hand. I'm thankful to be blessed with a modeling career that has provided me the funds to be able to also invest in ourselves and this technology.
Awesome. Well, where do you model, Daniel?
I'm actually signed with a pretty big modeling agency in New York.
Well, that's awesome. That's the last thing in the world I would have guessed from somebody in this field. Oh, I invent free energy devices, and by the way, I'm a model. It always takes people by surprise when you tell them something like that. They're just like, I don't get it. And you know what? The honest to God's truth is that I don't really get it either. It's just I don't know. To be honest with you, my wife and I just completely shifted our consciousness within the past 3 years, and I'm talking from just priorities to ethics to morals to everything. We just restructured our whole frame of reference. And, I also attest a large part of that to magnetic pulse therapy. I don't know much about that. What is that?
Well, Dr. Oz came out with this article, and, it's been peer-reviewed by a number of different people, but PEMFs, you have pulse electromagnetic fields, where you're using these pulse electric fields for therapy. You can use it to increase blood circulation, cure diseases, and do a number of different miraculous things with magnetic therapy. You can structure water. Dr. Emoto was able to put a coil next to a fish tank, and the fish actually, their offsprings all exhibited the same characteristics of consciousness. They swam with each other in synchronicity, and they also had a different color on their coats.
I'll have to research that.
Yeah, so PEMFs, very revolutionary stuff that's being talked about now, and it's just, It's like you're supposed to be able to create, let's say, a chamber and walk into this chamber and rejuvenate yourself. So the pulsed electromagnetic fields restore the production of ATP in your cells. You reduce the effects of the oxidization of aging.
I'm sure everybody wants to do that.
For sure. For sure. So one of the people that we learned from, Jamie Buturf, he actually sells pulse therapy devices that are just the same principle. And then you have other people like Dr. Pollock, who advocates the electromagnetic pulse therapy, and it's pretty interesting for sure. It's new stuff. It's supposed to be like a frequency following response. Have you ever done any research on brain entrainment?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so brain entrainment is basically like you have two hemispheres of your brain. You have your left brain and your right brain. And they always fight against each other. They never agree on anything. So the only way that you can really get them to agree on anything is to entrain them. That means that you would be putting on a headphone, on headphones, and your left speaker for your left ear is, let's just say, 142 hertz. And then the one on your right ear is 146 hertz. That gives you a 4 hertz difference. So you'll perceive this kind of a phantom tone in your brain. It's almost like a throbbing. You'll hear it, but it's only happening in your mind.
Right.
So you're entraining your brain to do something that it never does, and that's to work together and create a balance.
That should be fairly easy to create.
Yeah, it's pretty easy, and you could do that with specific software. I use Vertins, so I went to Vertins.com and downloaded some software there. Mm-hmm. But you can create this synchronicity in your brain and basically regulate any kind of feeling that you're trying to attain. So you can range from REM sleep to awake, alert, and multitasking if you're trying to read things and just process at a higher level.
What's the next step for your company? What's the next thing you want to do?
Well, the next thing that we're really aiming to do is create a showcase so that we can demonstrate these technologies in full functionality and demonstrate to people that they're ready now.
And by showcase, do you mean YouTube video, or you're talking about a physical demonstration?
We would like to create a physical demonstration of somewhere around 24 coils, ultimately, to designate them to each independent application. So, for instance, we can create stackable generators that people can put in their homes. We would like to stack something like 6 coils high with rotors in between each one, and you turn on one of them and all the rest of them magnetically lock to each other.
Wow.
So you basically create these generator systems on stackable units that can be stacked endlessly.
If somebody wants to donate to your cause right now, other than the website, is that the only place they can get in touch with you? The 1StopEnergies.com?
Sure, there's 1StopEnergies.com, and then I also have my direct email is danielnunezmind@gmail.com.
Okay.
DANIELNUNEZMIND@gmail.com.
Great. Awesome. Was there anything else that you would like to add to this interview before we close?
I really just wanted to say thank you for reaching out to me again and taking the interest to press this on forward and share the knowledge with everyone. I feel that, the time has come and everybody is asking for the same sustainable future, and it seems that our planet needs it. So
yeah, obviously.
It's quite a blessing to actually be able to be a part of that and promote the knowledge.
Well, it's my pleasure, Daniel, and I so appreciate what you're doing and the fact that you are doing the research and you're willing to teach other people what you find. I believe it's going to take people with that mindset in order to change the planet. You're a pioneer.
Thank you very much, Larry. Thank you.
It's awesome.
And we all do it together. The more we stick together and you have an expert in one field that can share his knowledge with somebody else and we can work together and create things quickly, that's how the real change happens. So I can't do it on my own, and the more I can contribute, the better I feel. So thank you for also helping this process.
You're most welcome. Well, that wraps it up for this evening. I appreciate you joining The Most Dangerous Device.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you for listening to The Most Dangerous Device radio show. Until the next time, keep an open mind. Let the light shine in.